Cool, we're live.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody, for joining this week's Office Hours. I'm not even sure what number we're on now. Alex, is it number 4, number 5?
I believe it's number 5, but I'm not sure.
We have some good questions to go over this week. I think there's some things that are going to keep coming up as repeat themes that I'd like to cover. So I'm just going to scroll up to the questions here, and I think one of the things I wanted to cover before we get into new questions was just to cover an action from last week, which was Dan Cube had some questions around Agora. Just getting my notes up. Yeah, so I made a post on the forum late last week and asked for a session to go over Agora and to have some specific objectives of where we come out of that session, so indexers are sort of capable of using the tools required to get data into Agora and do something useful with the data that comes out the other side. And Zach has kindly confirmed that he's going to set up an Agora workshop, and Zach is with us today. Thanks for joining, Zach. So if anybody has any Agora questions today, then you're free to drop them in the Office Hours chat channel below this voice channel. In order to kick things off, maybe we'll go back to Dan Cube's original question about Agora, and you can maybe add some commentary to that, Zach, if that's okay. I'm just scrolling up to try and find his question.
Yeah, I think I just found it. I can read it if you like.
Go ahead, please do.
All right, so it says GRT per effort or GRT per time. I've forgotten what it's called now, but it's been a while since I looked at cost models. I remember last time I looked at this as an important variable, as it basically seems to determine whether your costing is going to net you a profit or you're breaking even, etc. How do you guys work out your GRT per effort? Is this even possible without query volume? I think that's actually that's the end of the cost model questions. So before I address that parameter in particular, I want to take a step back and kind of talk about our approach to cost modeling in general and the history of the communication of that, and then where I want to go from here, and then we'll answer that specific question about GRT per effort. So one of the things that I think that I failed at in the testnet was to really talk about what the motivations were for cost modeling and why it was designed that way. And the intent was that we wanted for there to be sort of a competition of strategies during the testnet and to see sort of emerging dynamic behavior from a variety of indexers as they would sort of capture different market segments. So I didn't want to be prescriptive in the way that I communicated the cost model in order to not promote any particular strategy, if that makes sense. So when it comes to costing, really the first question that you need to ask, and I think which is really the much harder question, is what market are you trying to capture? What kind of an indexer are you related to other indexers? Like, what do you specialize in? Are you someone who specializes in performance or price or what have you? What kind of a subgraph are we indexing? Is it easy to index? Is it difficult to index? Does it have a lot of query volume or small query volume? And all of these things are really more less of a question about the tool itself and more of a question of market research. So I think it was Jim last week who said something pretty brilliant, and I'm going to paraphrase it here. The way that they went about it was to continually increase the price until the price dropped off. I think that was actually probably the best possible way to do market research during the testnet. Since is like the only way that you could ask and get an answer to a question during that time, right? But as more query volume is coming directly from consumers, and by consumers I mean creators of DApps or people that will subsidize queries that go through the gateway, or even directly query indexers, you're going to have to solve this market research problem on your own. It's not something that I can necessarily help with, but what I'd like to do better in the next workshop, and then you guys can tell me if this is the right approach or is what you're thinking about, is then imagining a couple of scenarios, like what our market research might reveal, and then look at how we would approach tackling, like how we would approach optimizing our cost model in order to reflect our strategy, right? And so what Agora gives you is just a way to take queries and divide them into different buckets, which would be costed separately, and output costs for those queries. So it's the GraphQL shape matching that really divides it into different buckets. And then it's the expression on the right-hand side that lets you say how this is costed and whether or not that cost is parameterized on something within the cost model. So like what I mean by that, for example, is if you capture that the query has like a large skip value and that's expensive in the database, you might charge more for that and use that as a variable in the cost expression. And so when we wrote it, we were writing it that way to solve a specific problem that we've seen on the hosted service. That problem is that most queries actually go really fast, but every once in a while, someone writes a query that can take upwards of 20 seconds or even more. It may have a high skip value, may capture lots of fields, a complicated filter that requires joining tables, or something very expensive. And maybe they're even using that query trying to page to maybe like capture the entire database or something, right? Just draining information. So the problem that we were trying to solve with the hosted service is a way to differentiate between those expensive queries and those cheap queries, so that rather than doing what we're doing right now, which is on the hosted service, if we're under load, we just ban some of the most expensive queries because just because they're most expensive doesn't mean that they're providing the most benefit to the community. So rather than just ban them, you could reflect an accurate cost that people could actually be able to pay for them, but would also pay for what they're using in terms of the cost. And so when you look at like Agora, the strategy there, in the absence of doing anything related to market research, which I would find difficult to model in a tool, was to have this GRT per effort. So we know for all of our queries how long that they took to run on the hosted service or now on your infrastructure, and that information is available from the QLog tool. And I think during our workshop we're gonna go over, or Letter will go over exactly how to extract some of that information. So we have that information about how long the query took, and if you are doing sort of value-based pricing, or if you're penalizing expensive queries, you would want to see sort of a correlation between pricing and expensive queries. And so that just gives you some output that will tell you whether or not you're correlating those things very well. The reason that I expressed regret about this feature is because that's not really the way that I think you should approach costing for indexing in general. Really, I think it should be driven by that market research and your unique value as an indexer among the different pool of indexers, right? Whether you're going for price efficiency, or whether or you offer premium low latency service or index difficult subgraphs. Really, that should be what's driving your cost models. But we still need to have this aspect of it, which is more like, I think, of an afterthought than which prevents you from losing money or getting under a great deal of load from possibly like malicious actors. And that's why I don't think you should necessarily focus on that parameter first. So that was a very long answer, but does that resonate with people?
This certainly resonates with me, Zach. I mean, the way, I'm learning a little bit more there. Definitely, what I'm understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, the GRT per effort was a specific metric. Let's call it a metric that you were focusing on hosted. Now, you mentioned, indexers sort of focusing on their particular strength, whatever their unique value proposition might be, whether it's latency or serving big queries or any other number of potential utility metrics. So in theory, sometime down the line, Agora could potentially take some of those other metrics into consideration when modeling. Would that be a correct sort of assumption of where we might go with Agora in the future?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so it's an open source tool, and any way that we can add to that tool to get information out about the volume of queries that you are costing and then what outputs that they have, we're open to that. Those suggestions about what information should we capture, what should we be displaying there. We just added that what's there so far is just kind of the very first things that we thought of when solving this problem during the testnet. We're really hoping to add more in the future.
Cool. So your idea there of sort of walking through one of those particular unique selling points sounds really interesting to me. And I don't think it would even particularly matter which one it was. Which one you picked as the unique selling point for the sort of the test indexer. I think a lot of the issue, and I tried to communicate this in the post, I think a lot of the issue when it comes to using these open-ended tools is that because they're so powerful, people don't really know where to start with them. So if they've got at least a baseline example to start with, then they could they build their understanding on that baseline and then sort of expand from there their understanding of what the tool can do for them.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the tool is the wrong place to start in thinking about this problem, for sure. It's the way to express your thinking about the problem.
Yeah.
Once you've already established it. Right. So I think it will be good to then, take scenarios and then express those scenarios using the tool. And then in a way that sort of opens the indexer's imagination to different ways that they might approach the problem rather than being prescriptive.
Yeah.
That's the idea. We haven't yet prepared this workshop, but that's what I'm gearing toward.
That sounds good. Anyone who hasn't seen the forum post, if you have any comments, please add them. Add your likes to amplify the fact that you want something like this, a workshop like this. It helps in sending the signal to the Edge and Node team that there's something you specifically want. Does anybody else have any other questions specifically around Agora they'd like to ask at the moment? Okay. I'm just scrolling back up to the questions. We sort of have this ongoing theme. Thanks, Zach, by the way. That was a really great setting the scene for the Agora piece. I appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you.
There's a recurring theme, I think, with these office hours, at least for now. Well, we've all got hard forks on our mind about ETH node upgrades and, what's the status on things. So I'd be interested to hear if anyone's been doing anything interesting in the last week. Have they been testing any upgrades? me personally, I upgraded my OpenETH 301 nodes to 320 or 321 RC1, and it seemed to go very smoothly. I upgraded 2 nodes very quickly in the space of about an hour. Has anybody else been upgrading their nodes or got anything interesting to discuss on the node side of things? I think Steak Machine, you might have had something at some point in the notes here. Trying to find it.
It was
I just
asking.
upgraded, played with the get today, so 1.10.1 is working smoothly when upgraded. So it was upgraded for Ropsten testnet, and everything worked very well.
Is that just a few hours ago that happened? Today?
I think it was, about 6 hours.
Okay, that's great news. And it's great to hear your voice finally, Steak Machine.
Yeah, I finally figured out how to push to talk works.
Was there another node piece? I think you wanted to ask Sebastian some questions, Steak Machine?
We had a discussion with Sebastian about that Graph node have some corrupted JSON in requests, and it's still from testnet and not resolved.
I'm not sure if Sebastian is around. Hey, you're still here? If not, we can just leave that question for later.
Okay, let's move on then.
Yeah.
It's question not for Sebastian, but maybe for the team.
Yeah, but would be nice to have a background of what's been happening, just to know where to start from.
During testnet, we figure out that Graph node sends some corrupted requests to the Ethereum node, and when you're doing some load balancing, which looks for request body of the JSON, it can't take a look because JSON is corrupted.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, it's. I think it's still the case. I don't think that was fixed.
Is there an issue open for this?
I think yes, but I can find it.
Yeah, I think Goldberg opened an issue on this a while ago, like during the testnet. I think in the Graph node repo, but I can search for it later after the meeting, and I'll post a link if I can find it.
Yeah, if you could drop it in here, then that would give somebody like Ford a chance to actually read it before, to maybe provide some feedback on whether it's something that's been being addressed.
Yeah, can you take some notes? Yeah, for the next week. Just take some notes and we can talk about it if I find it.
I had a sort of follow-on question, I guess, then, which is about load balancing. I'm interested to know if indexers are using ETH node load balancing in order to increase their ability to, or the rate at which they can sync subgraphs. Is that something people were working on?
Sure. Everybody's doing this, I think. No?
I'm not. I mean, I've only just recently raised a second Open Ethereum, a 7 terabyte node. So I haven't had the ability to try that sort of thing. So I haven't seen anyone talking openly about it. Obviously, the ability to index faster is alpha for us. So I'm not surprised really that people haven't been talking about it. But if people are willing to talk about it openly, then it would be a great topic for here.
What
it
exactly
just works with
sorry, go ahead.
It just works with the standard Nginx load balancing.
Really? That's interesting. I did do some initial research. I picked up some old posts from some of the QuickNode guys, and I think pre-Infura guys, and Joey Krug, talking about how difficult it was to achieve this to do with something to do with the complexity of the requests and not being able to track them between various. If you'd made a request on one of the nodes behind the load balancer, and then your next request was through the other node, there was session problems or something. Maybe this has all been resolved, and it's just a simple matter of dropping.
No, there could be a problem if you doing some kind of front running between the nodes. So if you have a sequence in your request that need information and one node is out of sync for this exact block, then there could be a problem. But for most of the use cases, it's pretty okay.
There's also the issue of when you create a filter that's only present on the node, so that if you try to query that filter, it doesn't exist on the other node.
Can that cause you to essentially end up with a corrupt subgraph needing to start? I mean, I don't know if it's from scratch, but having to restart your nodes. Well, I mean, my end goal here obviously is to try and speed up the block processing. I mean, is that even something that is possible via load balancing your nodes?
I think it should be fixed in the GraphNode. I think in the engineering chat there was some discussion about it.
So this would be something along the lines of allowing the GraphNode to make multiple requests at the same time, or something along those lines, would it?
Yeah, there were some rate limit in the code.
I mean, isn't the solution to have different graph nodes connected to different Ethereum nodes and not really load balance, but just have them kind of separated out?
Yeah, that's what we've been doing during the testnet. It works wonders, but again, if one of the nodes goes down, you don't have a backup to know that node is down and you can switch to the other. So basically, if you split your subgraph deployments on two different indexers, and one of the nodes, one of the ETH nodes dies, then you'll be left with half of your subgraph not syncing, which is not great.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Ideally, you would want to have a working load balancer, but between the nodes, but more often than not, it doesn't work properly.
There's a old pull request or patch, whatever, that sort of changes the way the GraphNode deals with multiple node connections defined in one indexer, because right now it's still static. So it assigns a subgraph to an RPC connection at the start, but if that pull request gets accepted, it would use those dynamically. So if one fails, it would use another that's still available. And a while back I had a conversation about this, and they promised that they would sort of dig it up again and implement this, but I haven't heard anything really since.
Is this a PR against the GraphNode repo?
Yes. I think it was made by Ford potentially, and Yanis was going to look back into it.
Okay.
Yeah, I can confirm. I worked on that a while ago, and it hasn't been a priority to pick up again, but I would love to get that in. It wouldn't really help with volume or load balancing, but it would provide a failover, so you could supply multiple ETH nodes per subgraph, and instead of it being sticky and only talking to one ETH node for that subgraph, it would fail over to the other one if it had issues. So that would help with robustness, but not the rate of calls.
Got it. I mean, that really is our first port of call, though, right? Reliability and high availability, and then we can think about block processing and improving things there.
Totally. And you might be able to strategize and get some extra speed out of it by, only using, failing over to certain nodes that you have less compute on. So you can have a cheaper node that you use as a backup and maybe a high volume node. And so you can kind of have a more dynamic backup system.
the moment we have more than one subgraph, you would speed up if they're both defined, because then subgraph 1 goes to Ethereum node 1 and subgraph 2 goes to Ethereum node 2. Okay, if those haven't the sort of equal amount of demand, it's not entirely the same as load balancing, but it does split the load between the two of them.
Yeah, you could also do that now by defining different network names. And then when you would have to do some custom work, but when you deploy a subgraph, it could be like to mainnet 1 or mainnet 2 or mainnet 7.
Got it, yeah.
That's interesting.
Would that work with the ones that are already deployed? I don't.
I'd have to think a little bit more about the easiest way to implement that, but you basically need to modify the deploy request so that when your subgraphs get deployed to your graph node from the indexer agent, they get deployed to these different networks. So it wouldn't be straight out of the box, but it's just another idea for load balancing.
Okay, good conversation. Anything else anyone wants to discuss on the node side of things before we move on? Start answering some questions.
Fort, this idea that you just mentioned would make them sticky again, right? Because if you define mainnet 1, mainnet 2, they wouldn't function as failover anymore for each other.
Yep, totally. It would just allow you to separate, like all your mainnet subgraphs you could have a third of them on one node, a third on, for example. It wouldn't do failover, but it would allow you to separate across different nodes. I think ideally, the better solution would be to have a load balancer at the ETH node level, and keep the infrastructure on the graph node side simpler. But I understand that there is some tricky implementation there as far as making sure that things are consistent when they're called to the load balancer across the different ETH nodes.
Okay, thanks, Ford. So I'm just scrolling back up to the questions now, and we have a few questions from Chris, who sends his apologies. He can't be here, but he'll catch up with the answers on the video upload. So I'm going to put each of these questions out here, and anybody's welcome. If you have the knowledge, you're welcome to answer the question. So question 1 is, how does the GRT allocated to a subgraph affect the number of queries received?
Okay, so that's an indexer. So that's a indexer selection question. So I can field that. So there's multiple ways that this can affect indexer selection. So one is the stake that the indexer has that's not delegated stake is considered for the economic security, right? If an indexer has more stake, then they would stand more to lose by being slashed, and therefore they have greater economic security and more incentive to offer correct responses. So that is taken into account. And then the rest of it is mostly Sybil protection, and that's where the stake and allocation comes into play. So Sybil attack is when someone may create two different identities. And like if you view whether or not an indexer is going to be selected to receive a query or to serve a query as like a lottery ticket, right? You can imagine that if someone put their name into the hat twice, and then they would be more likely to be selected for that lottery ticket. That would be bad because it would just cause people to fragment their identities as much as possible in the protocol, and that's not like what you want to be incentivizing. So instead, the allocated stake is used as a weight in the selection, in order so that if you do in fact split up your identity, you are no more likely then to be selected as an indexer.
That's cool.
So just to be clear, you mentioned allocated stake at the end there. Is that so? That's total allocated delegator plus self-owned.
Yes.
Got it. Thanks for that, Zach. We'll move on to the next question. Are there any impacts on indexing due to the Berlin hard fork? I'm going to assume that's well, I mean, this is relevant to testnet as well, I guess, because testnet, correct me if I'm wrong, will be using the mainnet for the actual syncs. We're using mainnet subgraphs to sync on the testnet. So unless a node expert wants to chime in here, I think the gist of things is that you need to have your node, assuming you're running your own nodes, they need to be updated to whatever the latest release is that's explicitly got the hard forks in it. Someone else want to comment on that, please? Payne, what are you doing in order to prepare for the Berlin hard fork in terms of your node versions?
We already are running Open Ethereum 3.2 RC1, and we're just gonna upgrade to the new one, the official release. I mean, is it released yet? I didn't follow them for a while.
Well, as far as I understand it, the hard forks are in the client. Same with Geth. I think Stake Machine was just mentioning before that he has tested the 1.10.1, I believe it is, for Geth, which also has the hard forks in it for all of the test nets and the main net. So my understanding is, as long as you have that version running, then you're in the best position you can be in today to be ready for the hard fork, even if there's going to be an incremental update prior that we need to patch.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to Chris's third question. How can we run/test against subgraphs other than pull together? Somebody want to take that?
Well, you can deploy only the graph node along with an IPFS node, and then just start syncing random subgraphs from the IPFS files from the hosted service, basically on your own machine, if you want to do that. But if you want to have them running on the decentralized network, you will have to wait a little bit more time.
I think I saw a PR, a patch, an issue, something from Janice around being able to index subgraphs that are not strictly on the testnet or strictly on the mainnet either. I don't know if anybody else picked up on that.
Yeah, I believe he merged something last week. I'll have to pull that up and share that information with you guys in the chat later.
Sure, sounds good. So the answer is today you can't, if you want to do that, if you want to test against other subgraphs, you need to deploy an independent graph node.
Yeah, it has to be independent, and don't tell your agent about it, because your agent will go and stop your indexing.
Yeah, it'll interfere with your deployments. That's a good point. So you really just want to deploy a completely independent graph node. I see a question now from Jin Tao about starting a graph for BSC, but I don't think this is this really relevant, Slim? Is Slim still with us?
I think he cleared his questions in subgraph development as far as I was reading that chat, so we can just
okay, cool. Let's move on then. A question from me on behalf of Pete from Luna Nova. Is anybody reusing the same address that they use for their indexer on mission control for the new testnet?
What do you mean by key?
So I guess prior to indexer/operator keys, you would just have one key, one mnemonic that you would use in your agent and your services. So I guess he's asking if people are still using the same ones, and if so, are they doing it successfully?
Yeah, I'm using the same one.
Okay,
I
perfect.
think that's scary.
Why would it be scary? I have 30k transactions and it's just a Rinkeby account.
Yeah, as long as you're not mixing testnet with mainnet, then it's just two testnets.
Yeah, basically.
I interpreted the question to mean with the operator and the indexer tokens in the same wallet.
For the testnet, which is still fine.
Yeah, no, but what
you
I'm
wouldn't
saying
want
is
to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. So,
I think this is pretty scary as well. So, I mean, one of the concerns that I would have if I was doing this is that software, the whole point of having a test net is to test software. So it may not yet meet the standard of security that we would like before deploying something to mainnet. So you would be at an increased risk of exposing private information and having assets stolen. So that would be my concern. I don't know of any actual increased risk, but I don't think that should be recommended.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did a poor job of phrasing the question, because it's more about using the same key on two testnets rather than using the same key on testnet and mainnet. But still, very valid point.
I have a follow-up with the indexing subgraphs that aren't on chain. With the latest version of Indexer Agent, I believe we've released it, you can supply subgraph IDs you'd like to index that aren't on chain using the startup parameter off-chain -subgraphs. And I'll share in the chat this PR that has that.
Oh wow, that's
very cool.
brilliant.
woo-woo.
Everyone's going to start pre-syncing now, just random subgraphs.
Is there a way to that the subgraph deployment can be done over basic auth protection, so to say?
Yeah, I've actually done that using my setup, like with Docker and what am I using? Traffic to do basic auth, basically at the endpoint, and I've given that to somebody else, and they've been able to deploy subgraphs to mine.
Is that an independent node?
Cool.
Trying to
Yeah,
understand
it's
the
an
context of why you would want to do this. I'm just trying to understand the context.
Yeah, it's basically the question of, okay, adding subgraphs that aren't on chain yet for whatever reason you might have. Yeah, and obviously I don't want to leave stuff open to the internet just like that. But I was trying it, and it sort of works when you access it in a browser, but it throws a 401 something with yarn that is not happy.
I'm happy to chat with you about that later. Let's get that working, because I was able to do it.
Cool.
Excellent. So where are we at now with the questions? I'm getting a bit lost amongst the discussion here. If you want to help me, Alex. Or are we out of questions? Oh, here's one. We talked about this just prior to starting recording, so I just want to make sure it's captured. Steak Machine is asking, and this is in context of indexer selection or indexer utility. So a question for you, Zach. When will documentation be published around indexer utility choices?
I'm not entirely sure the best way to go about this yet. So what I can tell you right now is that the best way to optimize or increase the number of queries that you get is just by being an excellent indexer. So we look at things like the latency of query responses. We look at the price of queries. We look at how much economic security you have. We look at reputation and whether or not this indexer is typically online. We look at data freshness and see whether or not the indexer is or the subgraph is synced near to the chain head. So we look at all of these factors, and we can add more factors at any time. So the reason that we've kind of avoided documenting specifically how this works in practice is because we don't want people to be optimizing their indexer to try and exploit the selection algorithm. I think that would actually be difficult to do anyway, because the design is meant to balance these many factors. And so I think that if you're exploiting the algorithm, that you're probably just running a great indexer, right? But out of an abundance of caution, right, we are not revealing the specifics. It's kind of like a security measure, I guess. Beyond that, during the testnet, we sort of simulated a single consumer. But as we're onboarding actual DApp developers and actual consumers to our gateways, they'll be able to specify how they want to balance the prioritization of these different factors. Because you might imagine that a web app developer might care a lot more about latency, and someone who is trying to scrape a lot of information with very large queries, they might care more about price efficiency. Or if you have a very high value web page where people could lose a lot of money if there was a wrong report, they might care more about economic security. So all of these things will be parameterizable from the consumer's point of view. So that's about as much information as we can commit to sharing at this time. But if that changes, you'll of course be among the first to know.
Thanks, Zach. Steak Machine, do you have anything else you want to add to that? Ask around what Zach just had to say?
No, everything is clear. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Let's see what else we've got in the chat. I noticed a sort of dialogue going on with Wrangler. Wrangler, are you with us? You able to hop on voice here?
He's on, but he's muted.
Now is your chance, Wrangler. Keep on asking.
So he was asking about the process of withdrawing rewards from his indexer. So
he's trying. Go ahead, Alex. You take it.
Depending on how you staked your GRT, whether or not it's through a vesting contract, you have two options, or rather three options. So if you just stake through a normal wallet, you can simply just leave the portion that you want to withdraw unallocated, and you can basically interact with the contract and unstake and then withdraw after 28 days. If you have used a vesting contract, you will have currently, and that's about to change in a week or so, you will have to withdraw, unstake and withdraw everything that you have back into the vesting contract, because the vesting contract looks for a surplus, and the only way you can have a surplus in the contract is to have the original amount that is locked plus whatever surplus that you have. But like I said, that's about to change in I think a week or so. Because there is a GIP in progress that will make the rewards to be able to be sent to a different wallet altogether.
No, I don't think you mentioned it there, Alex, but it's probably worth mentioning that the change is not retroactive. So,
Oh yeah.
revenue accumulated since December is not going to be unlocked when this change goes in. It's just revenue from the point of contract upgrade onwards, I guess.
Yes, that's correct.
Unless somebody else has more information than that. Is that helpful, Wrangler, or do you have more questions? You should be able to talk if you unmute yourself on the left-hand side of your Discord.
And you need a push to talk set up in Discord voice settings. Otherwise it won't work.
Do we have while Wrangler's trying? Oh, maybe he's got it sorted.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes, hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, guys. I think I got it. So what about the rewards which I have currently accumulated in Index? Should I wait for the 28 days thawing period to withdraw it?
Difficult question. This is kind of the next topic I wanted to go on to, but we've just had we started the snapshot yesterday for the GIP that addresses this issue. That's going to last for 7 days.
Okay.
Now the council meeting that will be responsible for voting, the council vote on that change will happen in the days following that. So then you're looking at 7 days plus 2 or 3 days or more. And then there's the implementation phase, and there's 2 GIPs, which generally speaking, I understand the process would be we try and do them at the same time, right? So one wave of upgrades. However, the second GIP, which is not related to this reward one, is still awaiting audit. So we need to split the 2 up in order to have the reward one done in a more timely fashion. But just to give you my personal, this is just me as an indexer, my personal plan, I settled my allocation at 24 days yesterday, and my hope, and I'm talking only as an indexer here, I have to be really clear on that. My hope is that we will have resolved this and the upgrade will be in place within the next 28 days. But, I'm going to say it once more, that's just my hope as an indexer. That's not based on any privileged information that I have. That's just what I am expecting. So if you think it's going to be done within the next 28 days, I would suggest closing your allocations now so that you've built up, something that's going to be useful to you as an indexer for whatever your costs or your tax or whatever, once the change comes in.
Wrangler, was your question more about what you've already earned from previous closed allocations?
Yeah, so I have I can see a few GRT there when I call that for checking my route. So I just wanted to know how long will that be in the time? Is there any function I should call to enable the time 28?
So is this for unstaking your entire indexer?
I'm staking all my GRT which I earned stink.
Sorry, you're breaking up there. Can you repeat the question?
Could you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually staking it from my vesting contract.
Got it. And go ahead, Pat. Go for it.
Yeah, so in order to withdraw any rewards that you've already earned, that they are now in your staking contract, like Alex was saying, you're going to have to actually unstake probably everything, shut down your indexer for 28 days, which, is probably not the best in your best interest, in order to have a surplus on your token lock contract so that you can then call the withdrawal function and get out those rewards. So you kind of have to weigh the cost and benefit of, do I want to shut down my indexer in order to withdraw the past rewards and lose out on the indexing rewards for 28 days, or do I want to continue and I just have to wait until the token lock period starts where I can start withdrawing out that. So it's just something you're gonna have to decide, and then like Jim was saying, the new rewards will be able to be withdrawn to a separate address, but that's only for things that you have open right now. So whatever your pending rewards are is what you'll be able to withdraw once that proposal passes and is upgraded.
Okay. So is there any changes I should make after this goes live, or nothing is required from?
Are you indexing, Wrangler?
Yeah.
You are. Okay, I just wanted to clear that up. So you are an indexer.
Yeah. I am.
So the way the new upgrade will work is basically you'll just have to execute a transaction against the staking contract, and it automatically sets it as your. You're basically just setting a wallet address where the stake account will send your rewards to. So
Rewards. Okay.
yeah,
Got it.
it's just one transaction and it's easy.
Okay, got it. It's like where I need to update where my rewards.
Sorry, we're cutting off. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, it's like I need to update where my rewards should go to, the wallet address. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a transaction that you'll have to send against the stake smart contract. I mean, yeah, all the stuff that you will have to do in order to enable it will be shared whenever the upgrade is done. So don't worry about that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. I just wanted to mention Snapshot and make sure that everyone's aware that the votes on GIP 2 and 3 are ongoing. So make sure you get on there and sign your vote however you see fit. Doesn't cost you anything in terms of Ether. You're not actually making a transaction. You're just signing against your key. So it's not going to cost you anything to make the vote. And the more turnout we get, the better. I think there's something like 250 addresses at this point, or maybe more than that now since I last looked. So the more that turn out, the better. And with our last few minutes, is there anything else anyone would like to talk about with the last few minutes we have left?
Thanks for hosting these. These are awesome.
No problem. I always worry that we won't have enough content, and I keep a list of just random indexer stuff, or sort of tangential stuff that we can talk about, but we never really get through the whole list. I keep adding to the list and not removing things from the list. So yeah, I'll keep running these as long as people keep coming, and I do want to try and keep prioritization against any basic indexer questions that arise. We haven't had many of those today, but there'll often be days where we won't get to talk so much about the meaty stuff, and maybe we'll be talking about, I don't know, Docker, something like that. But if there's nothing else anyone else wants to talk about, we can leave it at that for the week. Thank you all for your contributions. We'll see you again next week.
Cool, I guess we're done. See you guys. Bye bye.
See ya.
Bye.